Hello and welcome to Access Asia. I'm Yuka Huaye. Coming up in this edition, is China really neutral on Russia's war on Ukraine? We'll have a look back at how its position has evolved over the past year. India's government is trying to encourage more investment and innovation as it continues to grapple with industrial accidents that kill thousands. And South Korea's #1 salesperson was in Washington. President Yoon Suk-yeol oversaw multi-billion business deals being signed during his state visit, including one with Netflix. China's President Xi Jinping has had a phone conversation with his Ukrainian counterpart Volodymyr Zelensky for the first time since the start of Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Beijing has sought to appear neutral on the war, but has also boosted its trade relations with Moscow amid international sanctions. Jenny Shin takes a look back at China's evolving position over the past 14 months.
Just one day after Russia's war in Ukraine began in February 2022, China abstained from a UN Security Council vote denouncing the invasion. It would abstain again the following month. The war, now approaching its 15th month, still sees no end in sight, and Beijing has positioned itself as a peacemaker in the conflict.
In the Ukraine crisis, China always stands on the side of peace. Its core stance is to facilitate talks for peace.
China has sought to maintain a neutral position since Russia's invasion, striking a balancing act between Moscow and Kyiv's allies. But its deep ties with Moscow has called into question its position of neutrality. While Russia was hit with economic sanctions by countries opposing the war, its trade with China hit a record level of $190 billion in 2022. During the two-day state visit to Russia last month, President Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin struck a friendly tone, calling each other dear friends.
We shouldn't overestimate China's mediation capabilities. Its relationship with Russia is very deep, and Russia currently considers China as its most important ally. So China's neutrality in this mediation process may be questioned.
On Wednesday, Beijing made a statement of an impartial stance when Xi Jinping and Volodymyr Zelensky held a long-awaited phone call.
It was a long and quite rational conversation. An essential part of the conversation is our views on ways to restore a just peace. I presented the Ukrainian peace formula, its specific points. We agreed to continue our communications.
China says it plans to send a special envoy to Ukraine in hopes to facilitate a political settlement.
It's been 10 years since a building housing multiple garment factories collapsed in Bangladesh, killing more than 1,100 people and injuring at least 2,000 others. Most of the victims were young women who were making clothing for international brands such as Benetton and Mango. The owner of the Rana Plaza building in Dhaka remains in prison. But the trial against him and others are progressing at a snail's pace, frustrating survivors and relatives of the victims. Rights groups say while there's been some improvements in safety standards, workers in Bangladesh are still underpaid and are discouraged from joining a union. India is also grappling with industrial accidents. According to the government, at least 6,500 workers died on the job between 2017 and 2021. The victims are often poor labourers working in factories or on construction sites. Our team on the ground has this report.
In New Delhi, Ismail Khan is still mourning his sister's death, whom he lost a year ago.
This is my sister, Muskan. She died in a fire. She worked in a factory. This picture is from when she was in school. She was doing modelling. When I look at this picture, I miss her very much.
On 14th May 2022, a massive fire broke out at this electronic manufacturing unit in West Delhi. 27 people lost their lives. According to witnesses, this building had no emergency exit. The only entrance was blocked by boxes when the building was engulfed in flames. Ismail puts the entire responsibility of the catastrophe on the owners of the factory.
If the company where the fire took place had put in one more exit, then everyone could have escaped. nobody would have died. The fault lies with the owners of the factory. When they took charge of it, there was no fire exit or anything, which there should be for emergency situations.
किसी चीज़ की सुविधा नहीं जो आपातकालीन स्थितियों में होता है.
The factory was being operated illegally. Ismail and other victims' families have sued the company and are awaiting trial. India, being the most populated country in the world, has embarked on a race to industrial development. The construction of buildings and factories can be seen everywhere. Tragedies like fire accidents are all too common in India, with poor workers often being the primary victims. In Ghaziabad, just outside Delhi, a factory of faucet parts agreed to open its doors to us. We met the director of the company, Mukesh Rastogi, who showed us around.
This is our machine area where we manufacture the taps and accessories and tires. This is our machine room, complete.
In this small factory, there are no emergency exits or fire extinguishers. The working conditions appear dangerous in this compact room. Every window is blocked by iron bars and garbage. The workers are not provided any gloves, safety shoes, or even a mask. When we ask Mukesh Rastogi about the safety of his employees, he prefers to pass the responsibility on to the Indian government.
क्योंकि अगर हेल्थ उनकी हेल्थ और एजुकेशन की गवर्नमेंट या हम एम्प्लॉयर को इतना वो मिले कि वो उस पे कंसंट्रेट कर पाए तो वर्किंग कैपेसिटी पे बहुत फर्क पड़ेगा.
17 employees work here 6 days a week. We were not allowed to speak to the workers. Industrial accidents kill and disable thousands of workers every year. The Indian Ministry of Labour has reported an average of 3 deaths per day in recent years, whereas the independent surveys of 2017 indicate the figure to be 131. To the east of Delhi, Ramsant has been bedridden after he got seriously injured 8 months ago. A bottle of acid exploded all over his body in the chemical warehouse where he was working.
होश ही नहीं था, आँखों से अंधे हो गए सर. आज ही नहीं दिखता आप लोग कहाँ खड़े कैसे हैं सर, नहीं दिखता. ना ही कंपनी मालिक देखने आई एक बार भी. सर हमें जो है 10,000 रुपए देते थे. न्याय चाहते हमारे गरीब आदमी सर, हमारी लड़की शादी के लिए आँखों से अपाहिज हो गए. हाथ पैर कब काम के नहीं रहे सर. हमारी घरवाली भी बेकार, उसका भी ऑपरेशन है.
After his accident, the family has no source of income.
I've taken loans from here and there, and then I'm able to feed the family. I sometimes ask for $5 or $10 from my relatives. The rent has also increased, and I'm under a lot of debt. I had property in the village, but I've sold it. It's been a year since this tragedy happened.
Ramsant has no resources for a legal fight. In the Indian capital, an international organization is trying to advocate for these vulnerable workers. Apurva Kaiwar is regional secretary of the Industrial Union. She denounces the laws which could worsen the working conditions.
What does happen now is that there is a move on the government's part. Random, unplanned, unannounced inspections are going to be stopped. So there will be, the inspectors will actually inform the management when they will come and inspect, right? And this is going to be, this is not something that is safe for anybody, for workers.
Other laws have been announced by the government. Among other measures, only factories with more than 250 employees would be obliged to have a safety committee, as opposed to 10 previously. A reform also criticized by the trade unions.
South Korea's president made a state visit to Washington, the first such trip by the country's head of state in 12 years. Presidents Yoon Suk-yeol and Joe Biden announced a key new agreement that aims to strengthen deterrence against North Korea. The deal includes the US agreeing to deploy a nuclear-armed submarine, and it also discourages Seoul from seeking nuclear weapons itself. Now, President Yoon, who has called himself South Korea's #1 salesperson, was accompanied by a number of business executives, and a slew of multi-billion deals were signed during his visit. Among them, Netflix. Its chief executive met with the president in person, as the company pledged to invest $2.5 billion over the next few years to beef up Korean content. Lisa Kaminoff reports.
술래의 눈을 피해 결승선에 통과입니다.
They are some of the most watched series on Netflix. In 2022, over 60% of users were watching South Korean titles. After meeting with South Korea's president, Netflix's CEO aims to double the platform's investment into Korean film production since 2016, confident that the country's creative industry will continue to flourish. For South Korea, the deal is a major opportunity to promote its culture and influence in the world. In the last few years, the country grew to become one of the biggest global cultural powerhouses, releasing Oscar-winning film Parasite, followed by Netflix hit series Squid Game, which racked up 1.65 billion hours of streaming in the first month. Their explosive success further boosted Korea's cultural mastery. But the movie influence is only a part of the Korean wave, known as Hallyu, which is sweeping across the world. It began with the music industry, headed by K-pop groups like BTS and Blackpink. By 2021, video, music and film exports had reached 11.23 billion euros. A report by the Korea Foundation shows that in 2022, 178 million people around the world were engaging with Hallyu. This is 19 times higher than in 2012. Netflix, which operates in more than 190 countries, now faces increased competition from streaming services like HBO and Disney+, but the South Korean investment could keep its users on Netflix a little longer.
That's it for this edition of Access Asia. Do stay tuned for more world news here on France 24.